see. Well, with us in studio today, Commissioner Sean Tindell of the Mississippi Department of Public Safety and Lieutenant Colonel Jimmy Herzog of the Mississippi Bureau of Investigation. Good morning, fellas.
Good morning, Lucian.
Good morning.
Well, thank y'all for taking the time. I know y'all have got a little bit going on in your various roles. I suspect for you, Commissioner, the last week or so was probably especially busy with all the road conditions.
There's been a lot going on all over the state. You know, even down in South Mississippi, where I like to say it's always 70 degrees and sunny, there was a lot of frozen roads. Schools were closed. But you look at the impact in North Mississippi, it's really been rough up there. I know Ole Miss, I believe, is opening back later this week. And we had pictures even yesterday of just ice-covered parking lots at our substations up there. So it's been a lot. There's been a lot of wrecks. Obviously, there's been some deaths. And it's just one of those events where everybody needs to take caution.
Yeah. All our troopers do okay through it?
They have. There was a couple of incidences where we've had some cars that were damaged, but fortunately we haven't had any serious injuries due to the storm to any troopers or our CTED units that have also been out there assisting.
That's good. Well, Jimmy, you've been on the job now how long at this point?
Actually, I haven't started yet. I'll start February the 1st.
Okay. And you're going to want to get just a little bit closer to the microphone. I can tell you're a law enforcement, not a politician type.
Absolutely.
Sean and I, by contrast, know right where to be on the microphone. So, tell us a little bit about your background. How did you get to here?
Well, actually, I went to Mississippi College on a football scholarship and graduated in 1992 with a business management degree with a concentration in management, BSBA. And I began my career as a state trooper in 1994 all the way to 1999. And then from 99 to 2022, I was with MBI, working myself from
really
FBI task force to working multiple violent crimes. I worked approximately 250 death investigations during the course of my career.
Wow.
Went from major crime unit as the Amber Alert coordinator for Mississippi, and then retired as the deputy director with the Mississippi Bureau of Investigation.
Wow.
And then from there, I began a career with the Department of Agriculture as the chief of security for the fairgrounds for large events such as the Mississippi State Fair and the Dixie National Rodeo.
Well, y'all did an incredible job there. I mean that, and I'm from Jackson, but going to the fairgrounds for all sorts of things, you feel like you're watching your six the whole time, worried somebody's going to come get you, and y'all have done a great job both of keeping it safe, but also making it feel safe, which is equally important.
Absolutely, it was a group effort with local law enforcement and obviously Commissioner Tindell and DPS. So those guys really made a big impact in keeping that area safe. They still do to this day.
Yeah. Well, we've done some remotes down there early in the morning, and when you're pulling down High Street at 5 o'clock in the morning, it's nice to see that police presence there as you're coming in. So thanks for all y'all do. Tell us a little bit for people who don't know. What is the Mississippi Bureau of Investigation, and what all do y'all do?
Well, the Mississippi Bureau of Investigation originated out of what used to be the Criminal Investigative Division of the Mississippi Highway Safety Patrol, and so along about 20 years ago, it was changed to be the Mississippi Bureau of Investigations, and it's really is one of the only agencies in the entire state that has statewide general police jurisdiction, which means essentially they can enforce and investigate any sort of incident across the state. A lot of times, a lot of your investigators, let's say the Bureau of Narcotics, they have a specific focus on investigating narcotic crimes. But MBI has general police powers, which gives them a much broader jurisdiction. As of late, and obviously with the importance of officer-involved shootings across the country, the legislature formalized what had kind of been a general practice that MBI would investigate all officer-involved shootings. So we've been doing that across the state for the last 2 years by statute, and then, of course,
by custom for longer than that, right?
Much longer than that. My days as a former prosecutor down on the coast, 02 to 07, at that time MBI was handling most of the officer-involved shootings, although there would be incidences where they wouldn't. The DA might come in and say that, it doesn't look like there's anything here, we don't need MBI to come. But now that it's been formalized, we're actually taking a look at all of them and presenting them to the Attorney General's office. So, look, in today's world, I think we got to do that to not only have the independence of the investigation, but of course our policies have changed to be more transparent on our investigations. So when we're complete, we turn over our files so that the public and the media and whoever wants to can scrutinize the investigation. They can look at the body cam footage. And that's just where we are in the world today, and a change that we felt like needed to be made. And that's kind of the history of MBI a little bit, but I can tell you moving forward, and one of the things that I'm really excited about, and Colonel Haynes started along with others, and Colonel Herzog here is going to keep going, is expanding MBI and growing it and getting it to do more investigations and be more proactive instead of just reactive, getting a call from a sheriff or police chief, hey, we need your help, or, it's an officer-involved shooting, we need you down here, wanting to be more proactive and look into crimes of public corruption or auto thefts or rings that extend from one end of the state to the other that local jurisdictions often have time breaking up because they're taking part in multiple counties and multiple jurisdictions, and MBI can play a bigger role in being proactive in those types of cases.
Well, I'm familiar with it, having worked in the governor's office for a long time, and know the good work you do. But I don't know that. I think most people's interaction, if they're going to interact with MBI, is either as a victim of something serious or on the wrong end of a law enforcement situation. And so appreciate all y'all do. What's it like? I mean, I guess will you start when now, Colonel?
I'm going to start February the 1st, so I'm still actually working with the Department of Agriculture.
Okay.
I will begin February the 1st, which is a Thursday, I believe.
And so your focus will be principally sort of, both the day-to-day management and thinking about how to grow what all MBI does and sort of improve where there are opportunities for that? Yes, and
MBI wants to be proactive instead of reactive, so we want to be heavily involved in the community relations. We want to be as transparent as we can. We want to continue training. We want to be one of the top-tier investigative agencies in the nation.
That's great. Commissioners, y'all sort of look to this legislative session. Are there MBI-specific legislation y'all have in mind, or is the MBI piece of it more just leadership and thinking about different ways to manage?
Really, the groundwork on where we're going with MBI as far as legislatively was laid a couple of years ago. And as recently as this year, for the first time in the history of MBI, we hired investigators from outside of the Highway Patrol. So now we have 10 investigators from across the state that have come from various local departments or state agencies and have been bringing a different dynamic to what we can do at MBI.
So historically, they were all roadmen for a while before coming to the.
That's right.
Interesting.
That's right. And so that was recently changed. And if you look at the models of TBI, which is Tennessee Bureau of Investigation, GBI, Georgia Bureau of Investigation, they started off the same way, but that's more of the model that they've gone to, and it's helped them broaden the scope of what they're doing, again, be more proactive. And one of the things that we're also going to be looking at is making sure that when folks come into MBI in the past, there was no specific training giving to the agents. So we're going to be doing an MBI Academy where we're making sure that they're getting that training they need to be the best investigators, like Lieutenant Colonel Herzog said, in the country. So that's what we're trying to create, is an atmosphere where we're not just wanting to be the best agency in Mississippi, we want to be one of the best across the country.
That's great, and that's a great mission. I'm curious, there always used to be, and at my sense, Commissioners, you've done a really good job in this regard. There always used to be tension inside of DPS between the folks who had been red legs and those who hadn't, and it seems like you've done a good job both of bringing in non-MHP investigators, but also just culturally having the department work as well as it could in that way.
And we're working towards that. There's always going to be it's been interesting taking on this job and working with law enforcement. It's kind of like a family. You might fight with your brother, But if
Right.
anybody messes with my brother, you're messing with me.
Yeah.
And there's always going to be a little bit of that between the different divisions, which I think in some ways is healthy.
Right.
But
I think anytime you've got highly motivated people, there's going to be some rivalries there.
that's right, and a little competition is good. And so, but what we have tried to do is make sure everybody understands we fall underneath the public safety banner, and we all need to work together. And also letting the folks know kind of the vision on where we're going with the future, and not just doing it behind closed doors, I think has been a benefit. And look, times require change, and the reality is law enforcement faces a lot of different obstacles in today's world than we did 20 years ago. And in 20 years from now, it's going to be a lot different than it is today. And so we've got to be prepared for that. And we've got to look to expand what it is that we can offer from the Department of Public Safety.
That's great. Can you all stick with us for another segment?
Absolutely.
Y'all, this is Lucian Smith in for Paul Gallo here on the Gallo Radio Show on SuperTalk Mississippi. Stick with us for more with Commissioner Tindell. I see. Well, we still have with us in studio Commissioner Sean Tindell of the Mississippi Department of Public Safety and Lieutenant Colonel James Jimmy Herzog, soon-to-be Director of the Mississippi Bureau of Investigation. And if you want to be part of the conversation, hit us up with a text on the C Spire text line at 601-879-4395. If you've got questions for anybody, we've got somebody on here who's already said what an outstanding choice for MBI director this was. So congratulations to you, Commissioner, and to the governor on a very good choice here.
Yeah, no, you look at his background and his pedigree, and he's somewhat of a legend, really, within the ranks of MBI and Highway Patrol. This man has done some high-profile investigations, and even has had death threats put on him by various gangs. And so, he's been out there making a difference for decades and is a seasoned investigator and somebody I think that brings a lot to the table.
I would think that's got to be appreciated by the rank and file at MBI, right? That their leader is you're a career investigator. This is what you've been doing your whole life.
Absolutely, I can bring experience and wisdom to the agency.
I imagine you've got some extraordinary stories, a lot of which you probably can't tell from your career.
I have a few or two.
Well, Commissioner, I know we're nearly a month in to the legislature now, and I know that's always a part of your job to try to think about what DPS and the state needs legislatively. I mean, what are you all looking at as the 24 session really gets going here?
There's a few things that we have on the table. One, we're looking to get a pay raise for troopers. I think that kind of sets the bar, and more and more that I see what goes on in law enforcement careers, and it's getting harder and harder to recruit folks into law enforcement. And the reality is, we need to have better pay, and so we're asking for a pay increase that'll get starting trooper salaries up to $60,000. I don't know if we'll get all that this year or not, but that's our goal, and that's what we're looking to do. And I hope what that does is that the rising tide will raise all the ships, and some of the local departments will also start paying more. And I think the reality is, if you go up to DeSoto County and Oxford, some of those local jurisdictions are already paying that amount.
Really?
And that's just how hard it is to recruit. We just started a new trooper school. We have 74, I think, that started. And so we had about 300 apply. If you look back 20 years ago, we'd have 1,500 apply.
Really?
And that's just, it's harder and harder to get young people to go into this career of law enforcement.
Do you have a sense if is that principally financial, or is it because the culture now, we unfortunately treat law enforcement differently than we did when I was a kid?
I think it's a combination of both, but because of the culture, you've got to entice the good ones to get into it with better financial benefits.
That makes sense.
And so, I think they're really tied together, and it's one of the reasons we're pushing for this, so that we can recruit those that have the temperament and the ability to be good law enforcement officers. And it's a lot on law enforcement these days. They have to be, when they show up at domestic calls, they need to be marriage counselors. And when they show up at wellness checks, they have to be mental health professionals. And then, they get somebody with a camera in their face. They got to be constitutional scholars to make sure they understand what it is they can and can't do from a constitutional perspective. And that's a lot to put on people, a lot of pressure. And so, a lot of people don't want to go into that profession because of the responsibility that it carries. But I can say this, and we had our public safety summit a year ago, and one of the topics that came up was recruiting law enforcement into the profession. And I asked the question of the law enforcement officers, how many of you would want your children to go into this profession? Most all of them raised their hand.
Really?
But they said, I want to see them get paid more, get more time off, and have better benefits that help them get through the day-to-day struggles of the job.
Because I remember, when we were kids, everybody, or at least it seemed like to me, everybody looked up to law enforcement. Everybody, if you were a law enforcement officer, you were treated with respect by just about everybody other than criminals. And now it feels like we've got a whole segment of the population that just loves to hate on the good cops and the bad cops.
I agree. And look, in some incidences, the bad cops have done a lot of damage to the work that the good police officers are doing. And that's something we've got to do a better job. And again, some legislation that we're looking at bringing to the table is revising the Board of Minimum Standards and Training so that we can have better oversight. And make sure that some of these incidences where bad officers have really damaged the work that good officers do, try to get a handle on that earlier so that it doesn't have the impact that we've seen. So,
and that board's for all LEOs in the state, not just people under DPS?
That's right. It's a board made up of sheriffs, police chiefs, state law enforcement officers. It's housed at DPS. We just give them facilities by which they can operate and then help them with some of their resources. But it's an independent board.
Okay.
But there needs to probably be some revisions to it, some broader powers. One of the things that we're looking for is some appropriations to hire investigators to investigate complaints about law enforcement officers. And so, if we can get those on board and do a better job of screening and training, I think we'll have a better product, and it'll help improve the image of law enforcement. And
is that something MBI does, investigate law enforcement, or is it only in the context of officer-involved shootings?
That's only in the context of the officer-involved shooting. The Board of Minimum Standards can take a complaint if a police chief or sheriff or state law enforcement agency has an issue with a law enforcement officer. They can turn in their certificate after they fire them and explain why they were terminated, and then that can result in their certification being revoked to go work with any other agencies.
Okay. What else legislatively? Do y'all have other priorities this year?
Well, and tying in a little bit to the working with and respect for law enforcement, we are pushing for a bill to bring back mandatory driver's education programs in our schools. Bring it back. I don't think we've ever actually had it. More schools had driver's ed 20 years ago than they do now, but we want to make it mandatory for all teenagers to take a driver's education course. If you think about it, to hunt, you have to have a hunter's education course. To operate a marine vessel, you have to have take a boater's class. We don't require that for driving,
which is incredible.
It really is. We're one of 3 states that don't, and so we're looking back at bringing some sort of mandatory driver's education programs to improve what is historically one of the highest teenage fatality rates in the country. In Mississippi. So, and a part of that, I want to see a lot of law enforcement interaction component of it, so that we're bringing Mississippi Highway Patrol or some local department into the classroom and talking about how you should interact with law enforcement if there is a traffic stop. And part of
that's a great point.
Well, a lot of these young people, they've never had any interaction with a law enforcement officer until they get stopped on the side of the road. And that's the first time they've ever dealt with a law enforcement officer, and they've been listening to different types of music and watching different types of movies that portray law enforcement in a light that this is their enemy, when in fact 99% of all the law enforcement officers are just trying to make it safe for the public.
Right, for the person who's driving and the other folks.
That's right. So we want to have that as part of the education component, so that these young people are getting to interact with a law enforcement officer, build a relationship, and then understand why it's important to go ahead and provide your license, to not be digging around underneath the seat while the officer's approaching the car, and things like that jeopardize the safety of everybody.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. In my experience, there are probably there are a lot of adults who could probably use a mandatory driver's education course right now. But I know that's beyond what y'all are focused on.
It is, but and part of it is educating the public about Mississippi law. If an officer asks you for your driver's license at a traffic stop, you have to provide it to him, and he doesn't have to tell you what he's stopping you before you provide it to him. That's law. And so I think a lot of people don't understand that they get their law degree on Facebook and YouTube, and they think they know the law and start quoting it, but that's not the law in Mississippi. So some of it's educating folks, and again, that's where I think a good driver's education curriculum can help curve it going forward so that everybody has a better understanding of public safety on the highways and roads, and also how to interact with law enforcement in these traffic stops.
We've got about a minute to our next break, and I'd be curious to know what just sort of on behalf of DPS and MHP, what are the things y'all wish? What are the other things you wish that most drivers knew? Things like that you have to provide the license. You don't have to be told why you were pulled over initially, that sort of thing.
Well, the move over law is a big one. I mean, obviously we see law enforcement and first responders injured regularly when they're tending to car wrecks, or somebody that maybe has had another type of accident or a medical condition on the side of the road. In fact, down on the coast, we had an EMT officer recently that EMT practitioner that was hit when a car struck him on, I think, Interstate 10. And so the move over law is very important for these men and women that are out there on the highways doing their job. So if you see the lights on, do everything you can to switch into the other lane and give them access to do their work so that they're not worried about getting hit from behind. And
so that's if you've got a law enforcement officer in the on the shoulder, you're supposed to get over into the one lane over, left or right, based on where they are.
That's right. Any emergency vehicle, when those lights are going, you need to move over.
Yeah.
And so that's a big one. And just also the overall respectfulness when we're driving. You see so much about road rage these days and folks getting out of control. People are going to make accidents when they're driving or make mistakes. You keep your cool and understand and move on. There's a lot of angry people out there driving, and we need to make sure people understand the getting a gun out and shooting somebody because you got cut off isn't the right response.
Yeah, I think that's good advice. You got time for one more segment, Commissioner?
Absolutely.
Hey, thank you all for being with us. This is Lucian Smith in for Paul Gallo here on the Gallo Radio Show. Anything else from either of you that you'd want to make sure that motorists know if they have an interaction with law enforcement?
Well, one is the side of the road is not the place to argue your case. Obviously, the courtroom is where that needs to occur, and we've tried to do a lot training our officers to understand and be more respectful and de-escalate some of these situations. And so, we're trying to do better on our end, and the public needs to understand there's a place and time to argue your case, and it's in front of a judge and in the justice court or city court, as the case may be. And then the other big thing on the traffic that we see, particularly with young drivers, but really everybody, we can't even say young drivers anymore. It's the texting and driving.
Yeah.
People looking at their phones and trying to operate the vehicle. It's just it's really dangerous. And in fact, we were talking about it off the air. One of the highlights of what I get to do is when I go around and talk to elementary school kids about wearing their seatbelt and the dangers of not wearing their seatbelt, and then texting and driving, and then we swear them in as junior troopers and get them to promise that they will advise their parents when they need to put on their seatbelt and quit texting.
My 5-year-old gets on me every time I don't buckle the seatbelt before I pull out of our driveway to take them to school. And I always get it buckled, but sometimes it's buckled as we're going, which I know is not best practice. But she gets on to me, and there's nothing worse than having a 5-year-old child tell you you're doing something wrong and have them be right about it. That's a motivator.
Oh, yeah, that brings the accountability home when you're being lectured by your 5-year-old. Typically your daughter's the one that really likes it.
And that's the one, in fact. So
that's it.
But, y'all have sort of shifted. Anything else legislatively y'all have got on the front this year, or is that sort of the main focus?
Those have been the main focus. We've got some work at Capitol Police. Obviously, the CCID lines expand this year under the laws that were passed. And so we're having to look towards adding additional police officers and get the funding for that to cover that extra territory. I think it'll make it about a third larger than it is now, and so we're going to have to increase that particular force if we're going to provide the services that we need. And look, Capitol Police has been doing a great job. Lieutenant Colonel Herzog was talking about it earlier, along with Commissioner Gibson. You look at what's been happening in the CCID and in the presence of law enforcement. The working with just not other state agencies like AG on improving it, but also JPD and Hinds County. In fact, we've been having meetings the last 2 weeks about various task force that we can do to help improve safety in the capital city. And I really believe that a thriving capital city is good for all of Mississippi. And I've said this numerous times. When you're coming from Gulfport, or you're coming from Tupelo or DeSoto County or Natchez, this is your capital city,
Yep.
and you need to be able to go to the Capitol. You need to be able to go to the Supreme Court building. You need to be able to go visit your state agencies, or go see the state museums, or go to the fairgrounds, or maybe your kids are going to one of the 5 colleges that are in the CCID. You need to have a sense of safety,
Yep.
and feel confident that you're not going to be robbed or pillaged every time you come here. And I think if you look at the stats and you look at what we've been doing, crime is down, homicides are down. I mean, it was just 2 years ago we were having a record number of homicides in this state, and those numbers are coming down. And I think a lot of that has to do with the focus on law enforcement, trying to get better law enforcement officers, not just here but across the state. And the state, and DPS in particular, understanding its role, working collaboratively with local law enforcement on various task force.
Well, y'all have done a tremendous job with the Capitol Police. I mean, just watching the transformation of that agency from, where it was first time I worked in state government 20 years ago to where it is now speaks a lot to your leadership of the governor, leadership of all the sworn men and women who've had a role there, and that it really is a testament to y'all.
Well, absolutely, and Chief Lucky's done a great job, and CTED coming over, I think it's been a good transition. And I'll say this, I mean, Highway Patrol has a long legacy in this state of being a premier law enforcement agency. I mean, it started in 1938. And there's been a lot of great men and women that have come through the Mississippi Highway Safety Patrol. So they set a very high standard, and one in which I think when we add Capitol Police, or we add CTED, or we've added MBN in the past, it really starts having that sense of a true state law enforcement agency. And the example typically set by the Highway Patrol has been one of excellence. And so I think that sets the tone for Capitol Police and these others that come over.
We've got about a minute left. Do you all have any sort of final thoughts on what your focuses are going to be this legislative session, or what you want to make sure people know about your agency?
Well, I want them to know that the people, the men and women of the Department of Public Safety, whether it's those working at the crime lab, at the medical examiner's office, all the way to the Driver Service Bureau and everything in between. We're trying to be more customer service oriented. We're trying to make our state safe. We're here to work for you. And we're trying to be prudent with the use of the taxpayers' dollars. So we're going to be working with your legislators like Representative Bounds and others to make sure that we're doing what they want us to do, and we're being good stewards of the taxpayer money. But most importantly, we're helping make Mississippi safer.
Well, thank you for all you do, and congratulations, Colonel, on the new post. Thanks for all you've done so far, and for all the good work I know you'll do in the future. We've had Commissioner Sean Tindell and Lieutenant Colonel Jimmy Herzog of the Mississippi Bureau of Investigation with us. Y'all, this is Lucian Smith in for Paul Gallo here on the Gallo Radio Show on SuperTalk Mississippi. We'll have Scott Bounds from the House of Representatives coming up. Stick with us for Fox News, followed by SuperTalk Mississippi News.